I'm Leslie Newman, 35 years old, a biotech researcher from Birmingham, Alabama. All my life, I believed family was the strongest foundation one could have. But that belief shattered the very moment I needed them most. In front of me was a crushing medical bill, $100,000 for a kidney transplant that could save my life. I trembled as I begged my parents for help. Yet instead of reaching out to me, they turned away, choosing instead to spend $200,000 on my sister's lavish wedding. To them, glittering lights and music meant more than the life of their own child. I fell to my knees, tears streaming, pleading in despair. But all I received were mocking laughs and a cold dismissal as they waved me out of the room. And that wasn't the end. How did things spiral this far? Why did my own flesh and blood choose a party over my survival? Stay with me until the end to uncover the truth behind this story. I've always been the independent one. At 35, I was pouring my soul into a small startup developing diagnostic tools for rare diseases. The work was grueling, late nights, endless grant proposals, but it gave me purpose. I lived alone in a modest apartment. No fancy car, no lavish vacations, just me and my ambition. My boyfriend, a steady presence in my life, was my rock, always there with a coffee or a late-night pep talk. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built from scratch, without handouts from anyone. Then came the day that flipped everything upside down. It started with a routine checkup at a local clinic. I'd been feeling off, tired, sluggish, a nagging ache in my side. I figured it was stress, maybe too many hours hunched over a microscope. The doctor's face told a different story. Her eyes narrowed as she reviewed my blood work, her voice low and careful. "Leslie, your kidneys are failing. You need a transplant, and soon." My stomach dropped. A kidney transplant. $100,000. The words hit like a freight train. I didn't have insurance. Our startup was too new, too cash-strapped to cover employees. $100,000 might as well have been $1 million. I sat in my car outside the clinic, hands shaking, staring at the dashboard. How was I supposed to come up with that kind of money? My savings were barely enough for rent. I thought of my parents, who ran a chain of BBQ restaurants in Birmingham, raking in profits from smoky ribs and packed dining rooms. Surely they could help. They had to. I called Dad first, my fingers fumbling over the phone. "Hey, Dad, I need to talk. It's serious." His response was curt, distracted. "We're swamped with the engagement party planning, Leslie. Can it wait?" I swallowed hard, explained the transplant, the $100,000, the urgency. Silence. Then, "That's a lot of money, Leslie. Let me talk to your mom." No warmth, no panic, just a brush off. I tried Mom next, hoping for a shred of concern. "Mom, I'm sick. Really sick. I need a transplant and it's $100,000. Her voice was sharp, almost annoyed. "Leslie, you know we're tied up with your sister's wedding. It's a big deal. We can't just pull money out of thin air." I felt my chest tighten, a mix of disbelief and anger. My sister's wedding. That's what they cared about. Not me, not my life, hanging in the balance. I hung up, tears burning my eyes, and dialed my boyfriend. "Gavin." "I don't know what to do," I whispered. His voice was steady, calm. "We'll figure it out, Leslie. Together." But even his words couldn't erase the sting of my parents' indifference. Days turned into weeks, and the clock was ticking. I scoured every option: bank loans, crowdfunding, selling my stuff. Nothing came close to $100,000. My health was slipping, the fatigue was relentless, and the pain sharpened. Every night I lay awake calculating, bargaining with a future I wasn't sure I'd have. My parents' silence grew louder. I sent texts, left voicemails, each one more desperate. "Dad, Mom, please, I'm running out of time." No reply. I heard through a cousin they were spending $200,000 on my sister's wedding caterers, a live band, a venue dripping with chandeliers. $200,000 for one night while I was fighting for my life. Gavin stayed by my side, brainstorming ways to scrape together the money. He called friends, reached out to colleagues, even looked into his own savings. I felt helpless, a burden, but he never let me feel alone. Still, the gap between what we had and what I needed felt like a chasm. My parents' refusal wasn't just about money, it was a message. I wasn't worth it. Not to them. The realization cut deeper than any doctor's diagnosis. I knew I had one last shot. I had to face my parents in person, make them see me, not just their independent daughter who never asked for help. Maybe, they'd understand. I drove to my parents' house, my heart pounding like a drum. Their sprawling Birmingham home, paid for by their BBQ restaurant empire, was lit up with string lights and filled with the hum of laughter and clinking glasses. My sister's engagement party was in full swing, a dazzling display of their wealth and pride. I parked my beat-up sedan among sleek SUVs, feeling like an outsider before I even stepped inside. I took a deep breath, clutching the doctor's letter that spelled out my need for a kidney transplant, $100,000, and a ticking clock. I found Mom first near the buffet table, laden with platters of ribs and cornbread. "Mom, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat. She turned, her face painted with a forced smile for the guests. "Leslie, this isn't a good time. We're celebrating your sister." I pressed on, explaining the transplant, the $100,000, how I had nowhere else to turn. Her eyes flicked to the crowd, barely listening. "Leslie, we've committed $200,000 to the wedding. It's a done deal. We can't just cancel it." I felt a chill, like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Mom, this is my life," I said, my voice breaking. She sighed, waving me off. "You've always been so independent, Leslie. You'll figure it out." Desperate, I sought out Dad, who was toasting with a group of business associates near a makeshift stage. "Dad, please." I started, holding up the letter. "I'm sick. I need $100,000 for a transplant." He frowned, his glass pausing midair. "Leslie, the wedding's costing us $200,000, venue, band, everything. We don't have that kind of cash lying around." I stared, disbelieving. Their restaurants were thriving, pulling in profits from every corner of Birmingham. "Dad, I'm begging you. I don't have time." He shook his head, his voice firm. "Your sister's happiness comes first. You know how important this is to us." I turned to my sister, who was glowing in a sequined dress, laughing with her fiancé and a crowd of well-dressed guests. "Sis, I need your help," I said, stepping into her circle. I laid it all out: the failing kidneys, the $100,000, the urgency. Her smile faltered, then twisted into a smirk. "Leslie, you've always been the independent one," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Why start needing us now?" The guests around her chuckled, their eyes glinting with amusement. I felt my face burn, but I swallowed my pride. "Please, I'm begging," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She laughed loud and sharp, turning to her fiancé. "Can you believe this? She picks tonight to play the damsel." Humiliation stung, but I couldn't walk away. I dropped to my knees right there on the polished floor, the letter crumpled in my hand. "Please, anyone, I need $100,000 to live," I said, my voice cracking as I looked up at my sister, then my parents. The room went quiet for a moment, then erupted in murmurs. Dad's face reddened, not with concern, but with embarrassment. "Leslie, get up. You're making a scene," he snapped, pulling me to my feet. Mom stepped forward, her eyes cold. "This is your sister's night. You're ruining it." A guest, some friend of the family, sneered. "Maybe she should have saved her own money." Laughter rippled through the crowd. My sister grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Go home, Leslie. You're embarrassing yourself," she hissed, shoving me toward the door. I stumbled, the letter falling to the floor, trampled under designer heels. Dad's voice followed me. Don't come back until you've calmed down. I walked out, tears blurring my vision, the sound of music and celebration fading behind me. My own family had chosen a party over my life, and I'd never felt so alone. I got into my car, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, knowing I had to find another way. I drove away from my parents' house, the sting of their rejection burning in my chest. Gavin was waiting for me at my apartment, his face etched with worry when I walked in. "Leslie, what happened?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. I broke down, recounting how my family had dismissed my plea, how my sister mocked me in front of a room full of strangers. Gavin's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he took my hands, his voice firm. "We're not done yet. We'll find a way to get that $100,000. Gavin didn't hesitate. The next morning, he told me he was selling his prized pickup truck, a beat-up but beloved relic he'd spent years fixing up. "It's worth at least $50,000, he said, already pulling up listings on his phone. I protested, knowing how much that truck meant to him. Weekend drives through Alabama hills, memories of his dad teaching him to drive. "Gavin, you can't," I said, my voice thick with guilt. He shook his head, his eyes steady. "You mean more to me than any truck, Leslie. This is non-negotiable." Within a week, he'd found a buyer, and $50,000 landed in our account. It was a lifeline, but we were still halfway short. Gavin wasn't done. He worked at the same biotech startup as me, surrounded by researchers who'd become my second family. He rallied them, sharing my story, not the humiliating details of the engagement party, but the raw truth of my diagnosis and the $100,000 hurdle. "Leslie's one of us," he told them at a team meeting, his voice breaking with conviction. "She needs us now." My colleagues, a mix of lab techs and scientists scraping by like me, didn't hesitate. They started a crowdfunding page, chipped in from their own paychecks, and spread the word to other biotech firms in Birmingham. One researcher, a quiet woman named Carla, donated $5,000, her entire savings from a side gig. Another, a senior scientist, convinced his network to pitch in, bringing in $10,000 more. By the end of 2 weeks, they'd raised $35,000. I was floored, tears streaming as I read their messages of support on my laptop. I couldn't just sit back. The gap was closing, but we still needed $15,000. I scoured my apartment, pulling out anything of value. My laptop, a high-end model I'd bought for work, was worth $5,000. I listed it online, wincing at the thought of losing my lifeline to research. Next went my grandmother's pearl necklace, a keepsake I'd worn at every big moment in my life. It fetched $7,000 at a pawn shop. A few pieces of jewelry, a bracelet, a pair of earrings added another $3,000. By the end of the month, we'd scraped together $100,000, every cent a testament to the people who believed in me when my own family didn't. The surgery was scheduled at a Birmingham hospital, a whirlwind of paperwork and pre-op tests. Gavin stayed by my side, holding my hand through every needle prick and doctor's visit. The transplant went smoothly, a donor kidney giving me a second chance. Recovery wasn't easy, 2 months of bed rest, pain meds, and follow-up appointments, but I felt stronger each day. Gavin moved into my apartment, cooking terrible soups that made me laugh, checking my vitals like a nervous nurse. My colleagues sent care packages stuffed with books and handwritten notes that kept my spirits up. Lying in bed, I thought about the family I'd lost, but also the one I'd found, people who gave everything when I had nothing left to ask. By the time I could walk without wincing, I felt a fire inside me, a need to rebuild my life stronger than before. Gavin and I sat down one night, sketching out a plan on a napkin in my tiny Birmingham apartment. We'd start our own biotech company, focusing on diagnostic tools for kidney diseases, something I now knew too well. With my research experience and Gavin's knack for logistics, we had a shot. We pooled our savings, took out a small business loan, and rented a cramped office space in Birmingham's Innovation District. It wasn't glamorous, leaky pipes, flickering lights, but it was ours. The first 6 months were brutal. We worked 18-hour days, pitching to investors who barely gave us a second glance. I spent nights refining our prototype, a device to detect early kidney failure, while Gavin handled suppliers and paperwork. Our colleagues from the old startup, still rooting for us, offered free advice and lab access. Slowly, we gained traction. A local hospital ran trials on our prototype, and the results were promising. Word spread, and after 9 months, a major medical conglomerate in Atlanta reached out. They wanted our technology exclusive rights, global distribution. The deal, a $3 million contract signed after weeks of grueling negotiations. I remember shaking hands with their CEO, my heart racing as I realized we'd done it. Our company, barely a year old, was now a player in the biotech world. With success came a new kind of courage. I couldn't keep silent about what my family had done, not just for me, but to warn others about the cost of betrayal. A friend connected me with a popular podcast, True Stories Uncovered, known for raw personal tales. I hesitated, knowing the fallout would be seismic, but Gavin squeezed my hand. "You're not alone anymore, Leslie. Tell the truth." So I did. Sitting in a small recording studio, I poured out my story. I talked about my diagnosis, the $100,000 transplant my parents refused to fund, their choice to spend $200,000 on my sister's wedding instead. I described the engagement party, my knees hitting the floor, my sister's mocking words, my parents' cold dismissal. I didn't name them directly, calling them my father, my mother, my sister. But Birmingham's a small enough city. People would know. The podcast dropped a week later and it exploded. Shared across social media, it racked up 1 million views in days, then 10 million. Listeners flooded the comments with outrage. "How could parents choose a wedding over their daughter's life?" one wrote. Another posted, "That family deserves to lose everything." Clips circulated with hashtags like "Yes, side justice for Leslie" trending. Strangers sent messages of support, sharing their own stories of family betrayal. I read them late at night, tears in my eyes, feeling a weight lift. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the shame alone. The world saw my family for who they were. The podcast wasn't just catharsis, it was a turning point. Our company's profile soared, with investors calling and hospitals requesting demos. Gavin and I hired a small team, moved to a better office, and started planning a second product. But beneath the success, I felt a quiet resolve. My family's betrayal had pushed me to the edge, but it also showed me who I could become. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, surrounded by people who valued me. As the podcast's reach grew, I focused on building my company and my new life with Gavin. But ripples from my story were spreading through Birmingham, and they were about to crash over my family's world. My father and mother ran a chain of BBQ restaurants, a local institution known for smoky brisket and packed dining rooms. Their success had always been tied to their reputation pillars of the community: generous hosts, family-first folks. My podcast shattered that illusion. It started with whispers, then empty tables. Customers who'd once lined up for ribs stopped coming. Social media posts tagged their restaurants with my story, calling them out for choosing a lavish wedding over their daughter's life. "I won't eat where they betray their own," one review read, shared thousands of times. Another posted a clip of my podcast captioned, "This is who you're supporting." By the third month, their flagship location, a sprawling spot near downtown Birmingham, was half empty even on weekends. Waitstaff quit, suppliers demanded upfront payments, and my father's usual charm couldn't sway the tide. I heard through a former colleague that they tried a PR campaign offering discounts and hosting charity nights, but it backfired. People saw it as a desperate cover-up. 6 months after the podcast, their empire began to crumble. 2 of their 5 locations closed, unable to cover rent. My mother, always the face of the business, stopped appearing at community events, her usual smile replaced by tight-lipped silence. My father took out loans to keep the remaining restaurants afloat, but the debts piled up faster than the revenue. By the 10th month, their entire chain was bankrupt, the last location shuttered with a faded closed sign on the door. Their house, once a showcase of their wealth, was put on the market, but no buyers came. Nobody wanted to touch the tainted legacy of the Newman name. My sister faced her own reckoning. Her husband, a wealthy real estate developer, had bankrolled much of their extravagant lifestyle, including the $200,000 wedding. When the podcast spread, he listened, piecing together the truth about how my sister mocked me while I begged for help. He confronted her, demanding answers, but her deflections fell flat. Within months, he filed for divorce, unwilling to tie his name to hers any longer. The settlement left her with little. Her husband's lawyers were ruthless, and her reputation as the golden daughter was now a liability. She moved out of their mansion, renting a small apartment on the outskirts of Birmingham, a far cry from the life she'd flaunted. The Newman family's downfall wasn't just financial, it was social. Friends distanced themselves. Invitations to galas and fundraisers dried up, and their once tight network of business associates turned cold. My father's booming laugh, a staple at every gathering, was replaced by bitter arguments with my mother overheard by neighbors. My sister, who'd once thrived on attention, stopped posting on social media, her accounts silent after a flood of hateful comments. Their name, once a badge of pride in Birmingham, became synonymous with betrayal. I didn't seek out these details, they came to me through old acquaintances, industry gossip, even a cashier at a local diner who recognized my face. Each story felt like a knife twisting not out of pity, but because it forced me to confront the family I'd lost. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate, but I couldn't ignore the justice in it. They'd chosen a party over my life, and now the world had chosen to turn its back on them. Gavin urged me to stay focused on our future, not their past. Our company was thriving with new contracts and a growing team. Yet as I sat in our new office surrounded by the hum of progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, a final confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, the first in over a year. "Leslie, we need to talk. Please call." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. My company was soaring, our $3 million contract fueling growth, and Gavin and I were planning a future together. Yet this message dragged me back to a past I'd worked hard to leave behind. By evening, my phone showed 18 missed calls, Dennis and Joyce, relentless, just like the 18 calls I'd made when I was fighting for my life. Their voicemails were frantic, pleading for a meeting. "We're losing the house," Joyce said, her voice cracking. "We need $150,000, Leslie. You're our only hope." I sat with Gavin in our office, the Birmingham skyline visible through the window. "They're desperate," I said, showing him the texts. He frowned, his hand resting on mine. "You don't owe them anything, Leslie. But if you want to face them, I'm with you." I nodded, feeling a mix of dread and resolve. I agreed to meet them at a neutral spot, a quiet coffee shop downtown, far from the ruins of their BBQ empire. I wasn't sure what I'd say, but I knew it would be the last time. The coffee shop was nearly empty, the smell of roasted beans heavy in the air. Dennis and Joyce sat in a corner booth, looking older, smaller than I remembered. Their tailored clothes were gone, replaced by worn jackets and tired eyes. I slid into the seat across from them, my posture stiff. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. Joyce leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. "Leslie, we're so sorry. We made a mistake. The restaurants are gone. The house is next. We need $150,000 to save it." Dennis nodded, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. "You're doing well now. We know you can help." I stared at them, their words echoing the desperation I'd felt 2 years ago. I remembered the engagement party, my knees on the floor, their dismissal while they poured $200,000 into my sister's wedding. "You didn't help me," I said, my voice low but sharp. "I begged for $100,000 to live, and you told me to figure it out." Joyce's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We thought Gina's wedding was important, but we see now I cut her off. You see now because you're losing everything." Where was this regret when I was dying? Dennis reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Leslie, we're family, he said, his voice pleading. Doesn't that mean something? I laughed, a bitter sound that made them flinch. Family. You chose your golden daughter over me. Where's Gina now? Why isn't she here? Begging. Joyce's face crumpled. She's struggling. Her husband left her. She can't help. I nodded, unsurprised. Gina's divorce had been the talk of Birmingham, her fall from grace as public as their restaurant's collapse. I reached into my bag, pulling out a check for $150,000. Their eyes widened, hope flickering. This is for the house, I said, sliding it across the table. But it's the last thing you'll ever get from me. Dennis grabbed the check, his hands trembling, but I held up a hand. Before you take it, ask your golden daughter. Maybe she can save you like you thought she'd save the family name. Joyce sobbed, shaking her head. Leslie, please, we're sorry. I stood, my voice firm. You're not my family anymore. Family is the people who show up when you're at your lowest, not when they need your money. I walked out, leaving the check on the table. The weight of their betrayal didn't lift, but it didn't need to. I'd built a life without them. Gavin was waiting outside, his arm slipping around me as we walked to the car. You okay? He asked, his voice soft. I nodded, leaning into him. I'm free, I said, and for the first time, I meant it. Back at our office, I threw myself into work, surrounded by a team that had become my new family. Carla, who'd given her savings for my transplant, was now our lead researcher, her quiet strength a daily reminder of loyalty. Our company expanded, signing new contracts, developing tools that saved lives like mine had been saved. Gavin and I moved into a modest house, not flashy, but ours, filled with laughter and late-night planning sessions. My old colleagues sent messages, proud of how far we'd come. They'd been there when my own blood turned away, and that meant more than any apology from Dennis or Joyce. I thought about Gina sometimes, wondering if she'd learned anything from her fall. I didn't hate her, didn't hate any of them, but I didn't need them either. My life was full work that mattered, a partner who'd sacrificed his prized truck friends, who'd given everything when I had nothing. The pain of their betrayal had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I'd learned the hard way that family isn't about blood, it's about who stands by you when the world feels like it's collapsing. As I sat in our office one evening watching the sun set over Birmingham, I felt a clarity I hadn't known before. I'd given them the money not out of guilt, but to close the door for good. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. I turned to Gavin, who was sketching out our next project. We're building something real, I said, smiling. He grinned back, his eyes warm. We already have. My story spread beyond Birmingham, inspiring others to share their own tales of betrayal and redemption. I read their messages, each one a reminder that I wasn't alone. But as I looked back on everything, my illness, their rejection, my fight to survive, I wondered what others would do in my place. If you were me, faced with a family that turned away when you needed them most, would you forgive them, or would you cut them out for good?